channel. My name is Lisa Alistway, and on this channel, you will find a variety of inspirational and informational videos. So if that sounds good to you and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. My guest today is Sean Kelly. Sean is the Influencer Relations Manager for Stack Up. Stack Up supports U.S. and allied veterans by promoting positive mental health and combating veteran suicide with gaming. I will be linking their website down below for your reference. Welcome, Sean.
Hi, how are you?
Doing good. So glad to have you on my program today.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me. Appreciate that. Appreciate the opportunity to talk about our programs.
Most definitely. Can we start first with you sharing a little bit about your background, including your military experience?
Sure. Yeah. So I joined the Army in 1995 out of South Chicago, trying to find a little bit of a way out of the area there. It was getting kind of bad, and there wasn't a whole lot of prospects for jobs, things like that. We weren't very affluent in, my family, and I was the oldest, and so I kind of took it upon myself to do something what I thought was bigger than myself and joined the military and did some artillery for a few years, and then decided that wasn't going to do anything for me when I got out eventually. And so I went into counterterrorism and intelligence, and I worked that until I disability retired in 2010. So I most of my career was working in counterterrorism and intelligence, again with a couple of deployments under my belt there, Iraq and Afghanistan, things that, when I first signed up, didn't know that those things were going to happen. Back in 1995, we were still dealing with a little bit of Bosnia, Herzegovina, the Balkans were still kind of a thing when I first had joined up, but actual war wasn't a part of my thought process. It's always like you join and they train you how to do all of this stuff. And again, coming out of the 80s and being an 80s kid, you always thought that the big bad was going to be, Russia and tanks, and you didn't realize it was going to be Islamic insurgents and terrorists and the world that we've become. So interestingly, that I went into counterterrorism and intelligence because that became my bread and butter for that next decade or so, from 9/11 until I retired. So but that's my military career. That's kind of like how I got to where I am now. After that, I decided to use my GI Bill and went and got a couple of degrees, and then decided to stay around and get a master's degree in community development and then planning. And then I ended up managing federal grants and doing some things, and then just gaming. I was gaming all the time, and I got into content creation, decided to start volunteering my time with Stack Up, which I found about 6 years ago as an organization for veterans with gaming and geek culture as the center point for their PTSD and suicide prevention platform.
How did you
then
find
I
it?
decided, hey, honestly, somebody invited me. Somebody said, hey, we got this military gaming charity that we just want to let you know that this is happening. And I think I saw a tweet from someone that said, hey, if you want to join our stream team, apply here. And I'd been a content creator for, at the time, maybe 2 years. And I had done some charity stuff before, but I just decided, hey, let me go ahead and apply for the stream team. The idea seems great. I like the gaming for mental health. I didn't realize I was using that for my own mental health. I didn't realize, I didn't put 2 and 2 together until I kind of saw all that. And so I volunteered for them for several years as a charity streamer and on their stream team before I came on board 3 years ago this August.
Okay, so Stack Up, I saw on the website, they've been around since 2015, and you found it by kind of word of mouth through your gaming community, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And
yeah, I'll say probably Twitter and socials, and I had known a lot of veterans just from my gaming in general. And then someone pointed it out to me and said, hey, here's this thing. And I was like, okay, let's check that out.
Okay, so let's talk about Stack Up, including their motto, if you don't mind sharing that with the audience. And basically, what is Stack Up?
So gaming is our passion. Veterans are our mission. Gaming is our passion, and that's kind of the summation of what it is that we're looking at, and that's using gaming and geek culture as the fulcrum to leverage the positive aspects of those things against the negative specific traumas and things that we've experienced with PTSD, anxiety, depression, mainly with veterans that are coming out of combat tours, but not just that. You can have PTSD and trauma from a myriad of different types of jobs and types of experiences. And in the military, it's not just combat trauma, it's also just the trauma of being separated from your family for a period of time and having this entire other timeline that you're a part of and this microcosm that you live within. And many times that takes you away from normal life that civilians, kind of have, which is, the organic, kind of nuclear type of, family friend architecture that kind of everybody grows up, and you got people that are, you got people that get they graduate high school, they go to college, they get married, they have kids, but while you're over here in the military, you miss a lot of that. So even if you didn't deploy and experience combat, there's still lots of separation that then creates, this other, my other experience that I can't relate to, and that gap also can create some mental health issues and some traumas. There's also military sexual trauma, as well as folks that experience things that are in a training environment. So there's lots of different ways that the military can put you in a circumstance where you're going to experience or be troubled by mental health issues with, not just because you deployed, but for other things too. And so what we do is we're using gaming and geek culture as a way to combat those things. And as simple as that is putting a controller in your hand, giving you a game, making the worst thing in your mind, maybe the last thing in your mind, giving you some people to play with. And maybe that's the thing that keeps people here with us. And that could be playing video games on the internet, on PC or console, or that could be, cosplay or D&D, or we like to say that, or rather, I kind of explain it as, for some people, it's their faith. Maybe it's church. For some people, it's their family. For some people, it's going to the gym and getting those endorphins and really, kind of working at that. For some people, it's reading books, going on hikes, those types of things. But for some people, it's gaming. Leisure activities just tend to be this de-stressing type of activity overall. Gaming is one of those things. And so because of that, it's like, why not that? Why not one more tool in your tool belt?
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. And I like that your organization provides a sense of community. I know a lot of veterans might feel isolated and also feel like nobody understands what they're going through. And your organization can definitely fill in those gaps.
Yeah, and just to say a little bit about our the community that we have. I mean, we've got a Discord community. We have game nights every night too, and these are something that people can take part in them, or they can, or they cannot if they decide not to. Some people just prefer to just like to have a place that they're associated with, so they can have it if they need it, but they don't want it all the time. But we also have, like I said, we have game nights, pretty much every night. We've got that community that you can have, that you can access. But it also is a tether to the world of gaming in general, where you can just go to a place where you could talk about gaming and talk about the new things that are coming out. We talk about Xbox, talk about PlayStation, talk about PC type things. But it's also not just veterans that are in there. We have a lot of veterans and active duty military folks, but we also have civilians and spouses and military brats and kids that grew up in that environment. Not everybody who's a part of the Stack Up community is a veteran. So that's kind of a neat thing. A lot of our volunteers, even people that we have on staff, not everybody is a veteran. So we've got this great mixture of very supportive civilian architecture with our military / veteran, community, which is part of our mainstay. So it's a really neat, kind of I don't want to say it's just a merger, I guess. It's hard to explain when you go to some of these events. We like, we kind of talk about, we take these veterans to events, and we can talk about that a little bit, but we've got this very supportive civilian and military and veteran support network that gives these veterans a safe space when they go to some of these events that they
Yes.
may not have felt comfortable in that, in that environment.
Yes, and I like that Stack Up not only helps veterans, U.S. veterans, but also you have a community with your allied veterans. So there's Stack Up is involved in countries like the UK, New Zealand, and I think there was a couple others. I just can't remember.
Yeah, we kind of you look at NATO allies and have that as like your template, but it's not just NATO allies either. It's because it's not just NATO, but the joke has been before, if you're not shooting at us, we're going to help you out. And that's it's the silliness part of it. But really, our allies. When I went to Iraq, with the Poles and the Germans. Those are folks that were there with us. When I went to Afghanistan, it was the Dutch and the British that were flying, their Apaches out there. And so the same bad guys shot at me, shot at them. And the US doesn't have a corner on the market of mental health issues for veterans. We just happen to have more veterans by a number. We just have more of them. And that's just a thing. But when we talk about other things like our 22 a day or more, which we believe it's probably more after the pandemic and during this last 2 years, and data will bear that out, later on.
So
we are not alone.
Just to clarify, that's that 22 statistic. It's 22 veterans commit suicide each day, and so, like you said,
yes,
it might be even higher given the last couple of years.
Absolutely. I think anybody, so, I've got a background in social statistics and some other things. And so if you know anything about how data collection works, that you can't get a full picture until, it's past. It's got to be old information that you can sit there, look at, and then query. And I think that we know anecdotally that number is higher during the pandemic because people were further isolated, and incidents of suicide and attempted suicide were up in general. So we know that as a segment of the society, with over 100 people a day taking their own lives in the United States alone, 22 of those being veterans, we know that it's going to be higher. So that, like I said, that information will bear itself out. And then we'll have to reconcile that. We'll all have to, as a community, as a country, as a nation, and I guess as a global veteran community, have to reconcile with, like, wow, what did the pandemic do to us? Because that's something that people may not think of at first. But someone who was already isolated, already experiencing depression and anxiety, was now further isolated during that period of time because we were all isolated. Additionally, during that time, we were all locked in our homes, and we were all, trying to find toilet paper and all of the things that, affected our lives during that period of time.
Yeah, the CDC Stats report that suicide is the 10th leading cause of death for all Americans. It is the second cause of death for those between ages 10 to 34, and more people die of suicide than homicide in this country. That
I didn't know. That's interesting. I did not know that's something that I will have to keep in my back pocket.
Well, I mean, if you watch the news, they make you feel like more people die of homicide than suicide, but suicide is a public health crisis that needs more attention, obviously, in our country.
Oh, for sure. And lots of marginalized groups also experience higher suicide rates. That's a fact, whether it's LGBTQ community, Black and Brown communities. Those marginalized communities are already experiencing something that is, oppressive or depressive, and they also experience those types of things. So I did not realize that I didn't know it was a second leading cause of death.
For those ages 10 to 34.
Oh, within that age group. Okay. And that's interesting too, especially with the world that we're in now too, Right. And God, that's actually really terrifying, thinking that it's you're starting at the age of 10 and then you're talking about suicide.
Yep.
So, here we are talking about veterans that have gone through these things and seeing this trauma, and then you're talking about young folk that are experiencing, this epidemic of suicide as well. And it's that breaks my heart just to even think about that.
Yes. And I think it's also important to point out, a lot of times we talk about PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome. That's like a single event that people are having, but there's another condition called complex PTSD. And that's more lifelong, like where it starts in childhood, all the trauma, and then you carry it over into the military. And so you have not just PTSD, you have complex PTSD that could be going on.
Interesting. Yeah, no, I didn't know that. But this is all great for me in learning that stuff too. And I wonder if that when you're complex, you're also compounding different types of traumas. And so the different types of traumas you've had in your life, to include in the military, whether it's just going to combat, but seeing multiple iterations of combat, seeing multiple theaters of combat, seeing multiple types of traumatic events, because there's not just one traumatic event that can take place to people while they're in a combat zone or while they're experiencing war in that way. There's several different types of things that I know me myself experience that they're not like each other. They are 100% two different types of traumatic experiences that I've had.
In my understanding that when you are discharged from the Army, there is like a debriefing to kind of prepare you back for civilian life. But I understand that it's insufficient because a lot of people struggle still when they come back to civilian life.
It is insufficient. And it's hard for me to go into any additional detail other than it is just insufficient. Yeah. Coming back from war twice, I can tell you, I don't remember a single thing about anyone talking to me about what we experienced. In fact, the only briefing I personally remember sitting in a room and getting from a lawyer, from a JAG lawyer, was about if we experienced any type of physical injury. We weren't talking PTSD. We were talking about physical injuries in a combat zone. And it was, how do we go to the VA? How do we seek out that help there? It had nothing to do with PTSD. So I guess I can underscore, your point that it's insufficient by saying I don't recall ever getting that briefing. If it was, it was so cursory and so like glossed over. It's probably different now, to make sure that I appropriately, caveat that with my combat tours were in 2003 and 2006. So in the decade after that, I think we did get better at some of those things. And so there probably is quite a bit of that. But I can tell you from talking to veterans, and I talk to veterans all the time, it is insufficient. Much as the mental health capacity of the VA in the United States is insufficient. We have had 2 decades of war and a whole 100 years worth of combat events that have taken place in the United States, and we didn't quite classify PTSD. We didn't classify, anxiety disorders. We didn't think about that. If you go back to World War I, World War II, Vietnam, shell shock was the word being used. We weren't really, or Gulf War syndrome, going back into the 90s, right there, right, earlier the late 80s, early 90s, Gulf War syndrome. Now we have a better idea of what's going on, but we're still far away from any solutions. And that's personal opinion. I don't want to speak for Stack Up in that way, but I'm pretty sure that most people would agree that that the mental health aspect of what veterans get today is still significantly less than what it should be. I myself personally, I have left the VA care for mental health to go on civilian care because I've found that I'm better treated with people who have studied that and worked in that in the outside world rather than the VA system. So
yes, most definitely. So let's talk about some of the programs that Stack Up offers.
Yeah.
Starting with the supply crates. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. Supply Crate is essentially a gaming care package. It's basically a box full of an Xbox, a Switch, a PlayStation, games, T-shirts, comic books, all sorts of neat stuff that we throw in there, and that is meant to be a potentially, if we send it abroad, it's going to be like a combat stress relief or a maybe a separation anxiety type of stress relief. They're, the Marines that are stationed at different embassies. We've got humanitarian missions that we're doing all over the world. If an earthquake happens somewhere, we're sending troops out there to send supplies. We do this all the time. The tsunami or hurricane, whatever that is, and we send these care packages of troops that are deployed in those environments, as well as veterans that are sitting at home after service, where they may be most vulnerable. They don't have that military camaraderie anymore. They're no longer in the uniform. They may be feeling a lot of that depression just because they can't serve any longer, or they're no longer performing that purposeful thing that they had in their life. They also made a lot of friends in the military. Maybe they're separated from them, as well as myself, as an example, having a very difficult time connecting with family, because you go off and you have your microcosm in this whole world that you live in. And so these supply crates are meant to be this, where you are, finding you, giving you something to do, putting a controller in your hand, giving you that gaming experience, that option to play with a community or connect with your friends from the military. And so all of that is just meant to be a kind of like it's suicide prevention by working on mental health and giving you positive mental health right in your hands with the games, specifically just sponsored for you. Someone sponsored that crate to go to you.
Awesome. So another program you offer is called Air Assaults. What is that?
Yes. Air assaults are where we take disabled or deserving veterans and we send them to all-inclusive, paid, very neat gaming and geek culture events. So you can think of PAX is a very easy one to go with. E3, when E3 was still happening non-digitally, that's something that we would take veterans to, put them up in an Airbnb or a hotel, give them a 3 or 4 day great trip. We get them a pass for the event, an exhibitor badge or whatever badge we get. Get them to meet developers, play games early, see a convention. Which, if you've ever been to a convention, that when you walk into a convention, these things they're a lot. There's a lot going on. There's booths and there's color and there's lights and there's people. And sometimes that can be overwhelming for veterans. And so perhaps that veteran wouldn't have gone because of their social anxiety or their PTSD, or they couldn't have afforded it. But either way, we give them that safe space. We show them this fantastic event and we say, no, you can have this. You're allowed to have this and you should have this. And that is, again, meant to be that mental health boost to say like, oh my gosh, I got to experience such cool stuff. And I saw all the coolest cosplay at Comic-Con. I got to meet some celebrities, maybe we get veterans to meet people like Bruce Campbell and take pictures with Bruce Campbell, or John Bernthal of Punisher. Or maybe it's their favorite streamer. We had a gal a couple years ago at PAX South. Her lifelong dream at that point was to say, I needed to meet Dr. Lupo. And so we made that happen. A Dr. Lupo hug took place. And so she was super excited about that. But it's really just trying to find whatever we can do with those veterans at these events. And they're just really cool. They're very, those events are just something that everybody should experience. And we make sure that veteran can get and can obtain that. So very fun stuff. I've been on 4 or 5 of these events where we've taken veterans out to them. It's so much more than that. It's so much more than that too, because even after the event, they're going back to the Airbnb and they're playing like Dungeons and Dragons with my boss. My boss is a DM. He's teaching people how to play Dungeons and Dragons for the first time. Because it's not just video games, right? It's all gaming. Everything that we do is gaming. So these events just give us an opportunity to really just have a great time and let a veteran just experience something that they may not otherwise have gotten to do.
Oh, so there's a difference between gaming and video gaming?
I don't particularly think so, but we only make the distinction because we sometimes get asked, like for the care packages for the supply crates, we have been asked to say, hey, we're not looking for a Switch or an Xbox, but we are looking for a lot of tabletop games. And gaming and geek culture is all gaming, whether you're playing Dungeons and Dragons or whether you're playing Go, if you're a Go fan or anything like that. Video games is our central, our little codifying element, because a lot of our fundraising happens with video games on Twitch and YouTube, as well as that's just kind of how this all started, was video games as a general rule, but it all gaming.
All gaming. Okay. So the other program you guys offer is called the Stacks. What is that?
So Stacks are our volunteers. They're our boots on the ground. We've got them all over the world, from New Zealand to UK, and what they are. Think of a chapter if they were chapters, but more so they're veterans, civilians, spouses, or active duty military folks that are in a certain location. We'll pick San Antonio as an example, and in San Antonio we've got our San Antonio Stack, and those people might. If we go down there for PAX South, if it comes back again, they might volunteer to work our booths for us. They might just have an event that's happening there. Like local college had a 5K running, and so they went and set up a booth by the 5K that told people about what Stack Up is and what we do, and kind of educate. We also do a lot of community service stuff. So even during the pandemic, we were out there doing like Earth Day. We were out there picking up trash and doing things. We were delivering food to folks that were shut in. So we were still doing community service stuff. And on top of all of that, we also do the gaming nights, the game nights that we have in our Discord, and you can pop in there and play a game. They'll do local events too. They'll do get-togethers and things like that. But so it's kind of all inclusive, but that's our volunteer force.
That's so cool. I saw on the website you have like the stack map where people can go into their particular state, their city, see who the stack leader is, and email them, connect with them, and then also maybe apply and become the stack leader if there's not one in your city.
True story. All of that is true. And in fact, if there's not one in your city, or you want to be a big part of the one that's in your city, there's a contact information. There's every single one of those has contact information for either the person that runs it or our community manager. And we definitely want people to, we're always looking to start up new stacks. If there's not a stack somewhere in your area, I'd love to see a Canadian stack. If somebody's on your channel and watching, and they have to be from Canada and they're a veteran and they want to support, if you're in Alberta or you're in British Columbia and you're like, hey, I want to do a stack, we'd love to have a Canadian stack. That'd be great.
Awesome. Okay, so another program you do is called Overwatch program. What is that?
So it's called STOP. It's Stack Up Overwatch program, and STOP is a non-clinical peer-to-peer mental health crisis intervention. So when I say non-clinical, it means that our volunteers, although they've been through over 30 hours of rigor and modular training, as well as HIPAA certification, they are not clinicians. They're trained to be the person that you engage with anonymously through our Discord. We use Discord. Discord's ubiquitous within gaming. I joke around and I say I DM people, or I Discord DM people more than I text or call. That's just something that is very easy and accessible. There's also, the National Suicide Prevention Hotline. You can call that number and get crisis help right away. But sometimes that phone call, specifically talking to someone, there's a trust issue, and sometimes you may not feel comfortable sharing those intimate details of your darkest thoughts with someone that you don't know. And voice is hard, and we're kind of in an era where we don't really call people as much as we send them pictures on Facebook and text them and send them things. So with all of that, Discord allows you to pop in anonymously and type to somebody and say, I'm in crisis, I need help. And one of our STOP volunteers or STOP managers will come in there and triage you, try to talk you through whatever you're going through, get a good understanding of how you're feeling. Try to find you some local resources. They'll do some searches for you, try to find you some local resources if they can. And then we have what's called a duty to warn. And so if we feel like someone is going to hurt themselves or someone else, then we do have a clinical board that we have, that with actual clinicians that oversee that program and advise that program. And so we'll contact our clinical board. And what that means is that we'll, as far going so far as a health and welfare inspection, inspection to make sure that someone's okay. We're trying to keep people here with us. And again, during 2020 and 2021, during the pandemic, we saw a significant uptick, and therefore we had to expand our STOP program, because not only are people finding out about our STOP program and have access to it, which is great, we want people to access it, but also more people needed to use it during that really terrible period of time of being locked in or shut in or whatever that was, that isolation. Also, it's for veterans. Every program we have is specifically for veterans, but we don't gate suicide prevention. So if somebody over the age of 18 is not a veteran, they can go into that Discord and still get the assistance, still get the help.
Awesome. So you keep saying the word Discord. For the audience that don't even know what Discord is, can you just explain what that is?
Yeah, so Discord is a voice over IP program, VoIP. You might have heard that term before. If you're an old gamer, you might have used things like Mumble or Ventrilo or TeamSpeak, things like that, where you log in and you've got an identity, and you join a room and you could chat with people just like we're chatting here, only just in a room, usually without video. Discord is something very similar to that, where you can create a Discord server. That server can be a name server. You can make your own server. I've got my own server, and you can set it up for your community, have places to do watch parties, play games. You can have lots of rooms. And so inside of that, that program, which is both web-based and app-based. So if you're not comfortable with downloading and installing something, you can actually use it through the web-based portion of Discord as well. And you can get to that from our website. You can click right there on our website and get right into, if you're looking to get into our Discord, you can get into it from there.
Awesome.
But it's a very cool program, and it's very neat that, like I said, I use it more than I use my text messages, because it's just the gaming world that we live in.
So I like at the beginning, you mentioned why video games, and you pointed out some of the benefits and reasons of using them. I know I'm going to have some people on here that maybe want you to address the myth that video games make people violent. What are your thoughts on that?
My first thought is the same video games are played all over the world, and violence is not something that is increased in other countries that play the same video games. I know, not to, I don't want to wax political on any particular point, but people, whenever we have like a shooting or something that takes place in the United States, people then refer to violent video games. Oh, look what that does. But that's, they're all over the world, and those events don't happen all over the world. And so there's definitely some things to attack there, and whether that's focusing more on mental health or certain laws or things like that, completely separate. But the other thing is that people that play video games are getting mental health benefits from it, and sometimes they don't even know that. And there's some research and studies that are out there in the last several years that talk about what video games can do just for your own growth and learning, hand-eye coordination, things like that, as well as giving you a method of relaxation, pleasure receptors, just like reading a book or watching a movie, because a lot of video games play out like a movie, and you just have to be a character in the movie, and you're making all the actions of it. So in terms of the myths and things like that, violent video games, I think the one thing that I would like to address, because you opened the door there, I get asked often, well, how are you using video games to work with PTSD? Because, doesn't shooting people online, trigger veterans who have been exposed to combat? And my response to that is, it's when it's in a virtual environment, particularly people like me who do play shooter type games, I 100% separate the two things as, apples and oranges. They don't affect me in any particular way. There are definitely things in video games and in some video games that I'm like, oof, I need to stay away from that. And so I remove myself from that situation. People don't choose often to be triggered for that purpose, but that doesn't mean you can't play Animal Crossing or Mario Kart or Stardew Valley or something fun and cute. My wife, who's not a gamer, plays Animal Crossing on her Switch, and she loves decorating the homes and all of that stuff, or playing The Sims, things like that. So video games are not just Call of Duty. That's the other thing to remind people, is that it's not just the shooting video games. Video games are, oh my gosh, there's power washing simulator. There's a video game that literally you spend time power washing things. There's mechanic simulator. These different, so there's tons of different ways to recreate with video games that don't have anything to do with combat.
Yeah. So when I was kind of preparing for our talk, I did a little research, and I looked at what the Supreme Court said about video games, and it is a protected First Amendment right. And they said that for individuals who are already predisposed for aggression and violence, video games might be an outlet for them to place their violence there rather than take it out on society. So, according to the Supreme Court, they're fine with this for some of those types of reasons.
That's interesting. And I, not to be too silly about it, but that makes a whole lot of sense when you get because the online toxicity of video games is still something that exists and that you have to combat. You have to take the good with the bad. And so there's lots of, and so that may be, people that are offloading, their aggressions in video games. Maybe sometimes that's just, a perfect outlet. As long as you turn you don't have to listen to everybody's voice communication.
Yes. And I correct me if I'm wrong, video games have age, restrictions. It's up to the parents to make sure that they're enforced in their household, obviously. But I mean, some games you can't play unless you're 18. Is that correct?
The PEGI system, and I can't remember what PEGI stands for, but like PEGI 18 is, a video game rating. It's just like a movie rating. So yes, they do have those.
Okay, another area I'd like to address with you is video game addiction. And we do know that sometimes these types of things can create an unhealthy obsession where if you're playing, 10 hours a day, you might be neglecting other areas in your life. Can you touch on that, and if your program provides any support to kind of help people not get into the addictive realm?
Not particularly. There's nothing that, to my knowledge, there's nothing that we address or do that talks to that specifically. Because for us, we're trying to give them. It's not for us. We're not thinking about the addiction part of it. We're thinking of this person's in trouble, and we want to give them something to relieve that stress. And so that's like the first. Line. That's our first. That's what we're trying to do at first. Now, somebody with an addictive personality that spends, that much time playing a video game, just like any other thing that you might do. I unfortunately, I can't really speak to that other than to say, as long as what we're doing here is giving people an outlet and letting them communicate with other gamers and play those games, we're less concerned about how much time they're playing, so much as they're not committing suicide and that they are relieved and experiencing some joy in their life from playing these games with the community. So unfortunately, I can't speak any more to that because it's not my forte.
Okay, I just thought I'd mention it because there is in a small minority group that go to those extreme ends, and if that is happening with somebody you love, definitely get help with the correct, professional help and organizations. Okay, so let's talk about fundraising. I saw on your website that in 2021, your organization raised their first $1 million, which is amazing. You guys are doing great. Can you talk a little bit about your fundraising and the things that y'all do?
Yeah, it's actually it's my main job. It's the hat that I wear the most days is working with content creators, people that are on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, Glimish, Trovo, all these different platforms to do fundraising. When we say $1 million year, that's $1 million cash. That's actually our revenue generated, year to year, and even last year was over $3 million, but that's a lot of in-kind donations. And so when we say it's our first $1 million year, that's the first year that in monetary donations, specifically dollars, we hit 1.2 million. So that was our first $1 million year. $801,000 of that came from content creators and their communities. which
Wow.
to us blows us away. That's almost $1 million just in content creators on Twitch and YouTube and Facebook alone, you know?
Yeah.
So that's just kind of a little surreal for me, because it's not like I ever thought that would be I would have never guessed. If you would have asked me 5-10 years ago if that was a way that people were going to be fundraising, I would have said no. You're nuts. That doesn't make any sense. Because I'm used to seeing the the 5K, like Susan G. Komen, people going out there and running and racing and being sponsored to raise money that way. I would have never thought about, because essentially when you're doing a fundraiser on Twitch or YouTube or Facebook, it's basically a telethon, right? It's the old school Jerry Lee Lewis type telethon, only it's on your channel, and people are watching, and you're talking about the subjects, you're talking about the subject matter, and people are donating. And I've always found that fascinating, that because I grew up, I'm 45 years old, 45 and a half, and I grew up watching the Jerry Lee Lewis telethons, and knowing that those things took place,
Call in.
and it's just so interesting that this is where we are.
It's
You call in and say call now, and we need,
Yeah. So on your
Go
website,
ahead.
it's called Call to Arms. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, we call it Call to Arms. That's our fun name, like Call to Arms. Everybody come to action and support the veterans, and we do that. And that's a year-long thing that we're doing. So this year is Call to Arms 7, because it's our 7th year operating as Stack Up. So
yes, and I know you have a wall of heroes where you have the sponsors, and you see the people who've donated $25,000, 10,000. I mean, it's really nice how you highlight and show those different support groups.
yeah, and some of those people are solo donors, donors rather, and some of those people are communities. Those are channels. Those are Twitch and YouTube channels that if you pick any one of them, if you click on that, you're going to get their Twitch page or their YouTube page, and that's the community that raised those money, that money. And for the folks that raise over $1,000, they sponsor a supply crate, and so when we send that supply crate out, we tie it to a streamer or a content creator and their community. And so they get a picture with their logo. When the veteran opens up the box, they know who did that. They know that event took place and that someone raised those funds to pay for that supply crate.
Amazing, amazing. Another thing I'd like to address is the donations. I know people can donate money. How else can people donate?
So on our website, we have we have a specific page that's other types of donations. You can send a physical check, you can donate cryptocurrency, you can donate old equipment, depending on how old it is. And we've got a couple of rules on our website there of what we'll take and what we can't. We don't take PS3s anymore. Once upon a time we took PlayStation 3s. I think we still take PlayStation 4s, we still take Xbox Ones, we still take certain types of PC equipment that we can use, because we also do custom built PCs sometimes for veterans. But yeah, you can on our website there, it'll talk to you about what other types of donations you can do aside from donating your time with a Stack. You can actually, that's another way to donate. Not just monetarily, but you can donate your time, which is just extremely valuable to us.
Most definitely. So where do you see Stack Up in 5 years, 10 years? What's the long-term plan here? So
it's an interesting question, because we just launched what's called our Phalanx House, and we haven't talked about that yet. But our Phalanx House is it's a mansion basically in Van Nuys, California, that we had an investor that purchased it and donated it for us to use for veterans. And I've been out there. It is a absolutely gorgeous property, marble floors, and all sorts of neat stuff, pool, jacuzzi. But on top of that, it's like a big Airbnb. It sleeps 8 people. We've got a streaming room. We've got a gaming LAN table with 10 computers that are all custom. We have a VR area. We've got a media room that people can watch movies or play games and sit in big beanbag chairs or lazy boys. We've got outside, we've got a Dungeons and Dragons, we call it the Tavern. So it's a big tavern out back. While veterans can come out there, and just like we have with these air assaults, this is the same type of a thing. It's just now it's just in sunny California, and we're right there by Santa Monica Beach. You can get out to the pier, you can get out to the beach, you can get out to Hollywood, you can get out to Universal, Disneyland. So it's kind of like this central location. So when we talk about where we're going in the future, this is the future. Right now, our stack up phalanx house, because we can use that year round. So when the next pandemic happens, or the next issue that that we can't, for a lot of these conventions are now going digital, virtual, and so let's say we run out of places to take veterans. That's not going to happen, but let's say we run out of the same amount of choices, the Comic-Cons that might, kind of slow down, or the PAXs that might, shut down like PAX South did. Well, we have this place now that is 100% the same thing, and we can take them to these cool places and these cool events. Also, being in the LA area, we're right by a lot of gaming studios, and so we can make those types of tours and things happen. So going forward, that house is going to be a permanent and very useful tool, not just for veterans in general, but there's 300,000 veterans, I guess, in the LA County area. I think is about those 300,000 veterans. And so tapping into that and letting them come out and see the house and utilize the house for recreation, all again supporting the health and welfare, mental health and welfare of our veterans to prevent suicide.
That's awesome. Very cool. One thing that just kind of pops in my head, there's all this talk around the metaverse. Is that something that Stack is also involved with or looking at?
Interestingly enough, we are aware of the metaverse. And I don't know if there's one metaverse or if there's a couple of different server nodes that people do, but we've done virtual conferences where we've had a virtual booth in the metaverse where you as a character, you can walk up. It's almost like The Sims, when you're part of these things, you can walk up and you can see our booth and you can interact with our videos and donate and those types of things. So we do have a little bit of experience with it. I don't know much more if we're doing anything, going forward and how that's going to work out. It's all pretty new. But we did get to play with it in the last couple of years. And so that's a kind of a neat thing.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we're getting here to the end. Anything else that you would like to share about Stack Up with the audience?
I think that the only real thing to just hammer in there is that what we're doing is it's really no different than watching your favorite Marvel movie or your favorite comic book series, your favorite book series. It's a form of recreation that I think that some people may not realize. I myself was doing this for years and I didn't realize that I was treating myself, and my PTSD and my anxiety and my depression and my the traumas that I experienced by forgetting about them for a while and doing something that is extremely healthy, as well as engaging with other veterans, other people, and just having a good time. So it's when you're having fun, when you've got something engaging, you've got something going on, we can make the worst thing in your mind the last thing in your mind, and maybe that worst thing in your mind doesn't get a chance to consume you.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm so glad an organization like yours exists, and I hope that the word gets out and more veterans are made aware of this, and even people in the community that might be, dealing with mental health issues or suicide, that they can get in contact and volunteer, donate, support your organization. And I do wish you much success with it.
Thank you so much. And thanks for giving us the opportunity to come on your channel and talk about it.
Yes, thank you, Sean. And if you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to leave a comment or a question down below. We'd love to hear your feedback, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to be alerted to when the next video drops. Thanks for watching.